There are moments in life that define us, moments that split time into before and after. I used to think those moments would be big, dramatic events, the kind that happen in movies. But the night I walked into my bedroom and saw my wife in bed with my brother, I learned that betrayal doesn't always announce itself with grand gestures. Sometimes, it creeps up on you, silent and insidious, until it finally bares its fangs and sinks them deep into your soul. I stood in the doorway, frozen. The sight before me was something out of a nightmare. Erin, the woman I had spent 10 years of my life loving, tangled in the sheets with Nick, my own flesh and blood. The same brother who had been my best friend growing up, the one I had trusted with everything. And then, as if the situation wasn't already twisted enough, Nick looked right at me, and smirked. A slow, knowing smirk that made my stomach churn with pure, unfiltered rage. I could have lost it right then. I could have charged across the room and ripped him apart, thrown Erin out of the house, screamed until my voice was raw. But instead, I did something that wiped that smirk right off his face. I lifted my phone, met his gaze, and said in a cold, even voice, "I just sent your video." The shift in the air was instant. Erin gasped, clutching the blanket to her chest, her face draining of all color. Nick, who just a second ago had been so damn cocky, shot up in bed, his expression twisting from smug amusement to full-blown panic. "WH, what the hell are you talking about?" Erin stammered, her voice shaking. I stepped forward, letting the weight of my words settle over them. "You think I didn't know?" I let out a humorless laugh. "You think I didn't notice the little glances? The hushed phone calls? The sudden need to work late or grab drinks with the girls?" My eyes locked onto hers, and I could see the realization dawning. She had underestimated me. Nick swung his legs over the bed, gripping the sheets like they were his last lifeline. "Jake, man, let's talk about this," he started, his voice dripping with false calm. "It's not what you think." I let out a sharp laugh. "Oh, it's exactly what I think, Nick." My grip on my phone tightened as I continued. "I installed cameras in the house weeks ago. You two have been so damn careless, so sure that I was blind. But I knew." I tilted my head slightly. "And now, well, let's just say that video is already in the right hands." Erin let out a strangled sob, lunging toward me, but I stepped back. "Jake, please," she pleaded. "Who did you send it to?" I stared at her, really stared, at the woman I had built a life with, the woman I had given everything to. And now, all I saw was a stranger. My lawyer. My parents. Oh, and Nick. I turned toward my brother, watching the way his hands clenched into fists. "You might want to check your phone. Because I made sure your girlfriend got a copy, too." His face twisted in horror. "You sent it to Rachel?" "Yep." I nodded, my voice eerily calm. "And I have to say, I'm really looking forward to seeing how she reacts." Nick shot up from the bed, already reaching for his phone, his entire body trembling. Erin, on the other hand, collapsed onto the bed, her shoulders shaking as she sobbed into her hands. "You ruined us," she whispered through her tears. I felt something inside me crack at those words. She was blaming me? I clenched my jaw, taking a slow breath to keep myself from doing something I'd regret. "No, Erin," I said quietly, my voice thick with the weight of finality. "You did that all on your own." I turned on my heel and walked out, ignoring the way my heart pounded violently against my ribs. I had no idea what came next. All I knew was that the life I thought I had was over. And I was about to make sure they felt every single ounce of the pain they had inflicted on me. I didn't stop walking until I was outside. The cold night air hit me like a slap to the face, but I barely felt it. My heart pounded against my ribs, my breath coming out in sharp, ragged bursts. My hands clenched into fists at my sides, my phone still gripped tightly in one of them. Behind me, the house, the home I had built with Erin, stood in eerie silence. No shouting, no footsteps chasing after me, no desperate apologies. Maybe they were too stunned to react. Maybe they knew there was nothing they could say to fix this. Good. I reached my car and gripped the roof for support, my fingers digging into the cold metal as I fought against the burning rage rising inside me. I wanted to scream, to punch something, to drive straight into a wall just to make the pain stop. But I wouldn't give them that satisfaction. Instead, I pulled out my phone, scrolled through my contacts, and hit call. Jake? The voice on the other end was groggy, confused. Man, it's, 1 in the morning? What's going on? I swallowed hard, steadying my voice. I need a place to crash, Ben. Just for the night. There was a brief silence then. Yeah, of course. What happened? I closed my eyes, exhaling slowly. I'll tell you when I get there. Ben didn't press further. Doors unlocked. Just come in. I hung up and slid into the driver's seat, my hands gripping the wheel so hard my knuckles turned white. I didn't look back at the house as I pulled out of the driveway. I couldn't. Because if I did, I might just turn around and burn the whole damn thing to the ground. Ben lived across town in a small but decent apartment. By the time I got there, the adrenaline had worn off, leaving behind exhaustion so deep it felt like my bones were turning to lead. Ben was waiting at the door, wearing basketball shorts and an old hoodie, his dark hair sticking up at odd angles. One look at my face and he sobered instantly. Dude, what the hell happened? I stepped inside, closing the door behind me. Aaron. Nick. Ben's brows furrowed. What about them? I dragged a hand down my face. I walked in on them. In bed. Together. His eyes widened, his jaw going slack. Holy shit. Yeah. I let out a bitter laugh. Holy shit. Ben exhaled, shaking his head in disbelief. I swear, man, I always thought your brother was a little too, I don't know, friendly with her. But I never, damn, Jake, I don't even know what to say. Nothing to say. I muttered, sinking onto his couch. I already handled it. Ben sat across from me, watching me carefully. What do you mean handled it? I leaned back, staring at the ceiling. I had cameras in the house. I recorded them. And I sent the video to my lawyer, my parents, and Nick's girlfriend. Ben let out a low whistle. Damn. That's cold. They deserved worse, I said flatly. A beat of silence passed. Then, you sure you're okay, man? I let out a long breath, shaking my head. No. But I will be. The next morning, I woke up to my phone vibrating nonstop. My eyes were crusted from the lack of sleep, my head pounding. I glanced at the screen, 12 missed calls. 3 from Aaron. 5 from Nick. 4 from Mom. I ignored them all. Instead, I opened my messages. The first one was from Aaron. Jake, please, we need to talk. I know I messed up, but please don't do this. Call me. The next was from Nick. Jake, man, I swear it's not what you think. Let's talk about this before you do something you can't take back. I scoffed at that one. Not what I think. Then came a message from my mother. Jake. Call me. Now. My jaw clenched. Mom. Of course. Nick was always her golden boy. She would twist herself into knots trying to defend him, no matter what he did. A fresh wave of anger surged through me, but I forced myself to stay calm. Instead of calling her, I opened a new message and typed. Nothing to talk about, Mom. You saw the video. You know what he did. Seconds later, my phone buzzed again. Another message, this time from Rachel. Nick's girlfriend. Jake. I need to see you. Please. I stared at the message, my mind racing. Rachel had been with Nick for almost as long as I had been with Aaron. She was sweet, kind, the kind of woman who believed in the best in people. If she had just seen the video, she had to be devastated. And if she wanted to talk, that meant one thing. She wanted revenge. I hesitated for a moment, then typed back. Tell me where to meet you. The fallout had just begun. And I wasn't done yet. Rachel wanted to meet at a small coffee shop on the other side of town. It was a quiet place, the kind where people worked on their laptops or read books, completely disinterested in the lives unraveling around them. I arrived first, grabbing a table in the corner where we wouldn't be overheard. I hadn't seen Rachel in months. Nick and I weren't exactly hanging out every weekend anymore, but I had always thought she was too good for him. Now she knew it too. The bell over the door chimed, and I looked up. Rachel stepped inside, her blonde hair pulled into a messy bun, her eyes red and swollen from crying. She spotted me immediately and made her way over, her movements stiff and cautious, like she was bracing for impact. She slid into the chair across from me, wrapping her hands around the cup of coffee she had ordered before sitting down. For a moment neither of us spoke. Then, she exhaled sharply. I saw the video. I nodded. Yeah. I figured. She let out a humorless laugh, shaking her head. You know what the worst part is? When I confronted him, he denied it. He tried to tell me it was some kind of deep fake. Like I don't recognize the way he moves. Like I don't know my own boyfriend's body. I clenched my jaw. Sounds like Nick. Rachel took a slow sip of her coffee, her fingers trembling against the ceramic. I thought he loved me. I really did. But I guess I was just. She broke off, shaking her head again. It doesn't even matter anymore. I leaned back in my chair, studying her. So why did you want to meet? She hesitated, then met my eyes. There was something new in her expression, something sharp, determined. Because I don't want him to get away with this, she said. I don't want either of them to get away with this. I tilted my head slightly. And what exactly do you have in mind? She leaned forward, lowering her voice. I know things about Nick. Things he wouldn't want getting out. I'm guessing you have things on Aaron too. If we work together, we can hit them where it hurts. I studied her for a long moment. The raw pain in her eyes, the quiet fury in her voice, it all mirrored my own. An alliance. I hadn't expected this. But I didn't hate the idea. What do you know? I asked. Rachel's lips curled into a bitter smile. Nick's been stealing from his company. He has access to accounts that he's been funneling money through. Not enough to get caught immediately, but if someone were to, let's say, send the right information to the right people. She trailed off, raising an eyebrow. I let that sink in. And Aaron? I took a slow sip of my coffee, considering. She doesn't know it yet, but I own the house. Completely. She never bothered reading the paperwork when we refinanced last year. She thought we were just restructuring the mortgage, but I had my lawyer rewrite the deed. She has no claim to it. Rachel's eyes widened slightly. So you can kick her out? The corner of my mouth lifted in a humorless smirk. Oh, I will. She exhaled, shaking her head. Damn. We sat in silence for a moment, both absorbing the reality of what we were about to do. Then, she extended her hand. Partners? I looked at her, then took her hand in mine, shaking firmly. Partners. Nick and Aaron had no idea what was coming. I arrived back at my house in the early afternoon. I had left the night before with nothing but my car keys and my phone, but today, I had a plan. I stepped inside. The house was eerily quiet. Then I heard it, the sound of someone moving around upstairs. Aaron. I found her in our bedroom, stuffing clothes into a suitcase. She jumped when she saw me in the doorway, her eyes wide and frantic. You weren't answering your phone, she said, her voice unsteady. I know. She swallowed hard. Are you here to talk? I let out a short, humorless laugh. Not exactly. Her gaze dropped to the floor. Jake, I know what I did was unforgivable. I was stupid. I was selfish. But please, just let me explain. You don't need to explain, I interrupted coldly. I know everything I need to know. She flinched. I folded my arms over my chest. You should probably finish packing. Her head snapped up. Packing? I nodded. Yeah. Because you're leaving. Her face twisted in confusion. Jake, this is our house. No. I cut in smoothly. It's my house. You never read the paperwork, Aaron. When we refinanced last year, the deed was transferred into my name. You don't own a single piece of it. Her mouth fell open. No, that's not. She trailed off, her expression crumbling as the realization hit. You need to be out by the end of the day, I continued. I'll have someone here to change the locks tomorrow morning. Erin's breathing quickened. Jake, please, she whispered. I have nowhere to go. Not my problem. Tears welled up in her eyes. We can fix this, she pleaded. I know I hurt you, but we've been together for 10 years. Doesn't that mean anything to you? I stared at her for a long moment. Then I spoke, my voice cold and final. It meant something, I said. Until you threw it away for a night with my brother. Her lips parted, but no words came out. I turned and walked away, leaving her standing there, broken and speechless. For the first time since this nightmare began, I felt something close to peace. But I wasn't done yet. Nick was next. And he was going to regret every damn choice he had made. Erin was still standing there, frozen, as I walked out of the bedroom. I didn't look back. I didn't need to. I had already won this round. I had spent years making sure she had everything: comfort, stability, love. And she had thrown it all away for my brother. Now, she had nothing. By the time I made it downstairs, I heard hurried footsteps behind me. Jake, please! Erin's voice cracked with desperation. You can't just throw me out. I turned at the bottom of the stairs and met her tear-filled eyes. Watch me. Her lip trembled. Where am I supposed to go? I shrugged. You should probably call Nick. See if he has room for you. She flinched like I had slapped her. A dark, bitter part of me almost hoped Nick would reject her. That after all the damage they had caused, they wouldn't even have each other in the end. But I didn't stick around to see if she would actually call him. I walked out the front door, got into my car, and drove off, leaving her standing there in the doorway of a house that no longer belonged to her. It felt damn good. I had no intention of giving Nick the same courtesy I gave Erin. She got a warning. She got time to pack. Nick? Nick was going to burn. I pulled up outside his office building, my hands tightening around the steering wheel. He worked in finance, some middle management position that made him think he was more important than he really was. It was the perfect place to hit him. I grabbed my phone and scrolled through my messages until I found Rachel's. Are you ready? Her reply came almost instantly. Already inside. He's in a meeting right now. Security just let me up. I smiled. Rachel wasn't playing around. I stepped out of my car and walked straight through the front doors of Fairmont Financial Group. The receptionist barely glanced at me as I strode toward the elevators. Rachel had already cleared a path for me. By the time I reached the conference room, she was already sitting at the head of the table, her legs crossed, a file in front of her. Nick sat across from her, looking like he had just swallowed a knife. His face turned pale when he saw me step inside. Jake, he breathed. What the hell are you doing here? I shut the door behind me and leaned against it, arms folded. What's wrong, Nick? You look like you've seen a ghost. His eyes darted to Rachel, then back to me. You can't be here. I'm working. Rachel let out a small laugh and tapped the file in front of her. Not for long, you're not. Nick's jaw clenched. Rachel, come on. This is ridiculous. Rachel raised an eyebrow. Is it? She flipped open the file and pulled out a stack of papers. Let's see. Unauthorized withdrawals. Wire transfers disguised as operational expenses. And oh! My personal favorite, large cash deposits into your private account from company funds. Nick's face turned beet red. You have no idea what you're talking about. Oh, I do, Rachel said sweetly. See, when you started acting sketchy in our relationship, I started digging. And what I found was very interesting. She turned to me. Jake, you want to tell him the fun part? I grinned. Sure. We sent this to your boss an hour ago. You might want to start packing up your office. Nick shot out of his chair. You son of a... Rachel didn't even flinch. Sit down, Nick. He hesitated, his fists clenched, his whole body vibrating with barely contained rage. I took a step forward. What's wrong, little brother? Not as fun when you're the one getting screwed over? His nostrils flared. I get it. You're pissed. But this? This is insane, Jake. You just ruined my career. I tilted my head. And you just realized what betrayal feels like. Funny how that works. Nick ran a hand down his face, breathing hard. Okay. You've made your point. What do you want? You want me to apologize? You want me to beg? Fine. He turned to me, his voice shaking. I'm sorry, Jake. I screwed up. I shouldn't have touched Erin. I should have told you. It was a mistake. I smiled. Oh, it was definitely a mistake. Nick exhaled in relief, thinking I was going to let it slide. Then I added, and now you get to live with it. Rachel stood up, brushing imaginary lint off her skirt. By the way, the board of directors is meeting in 20 minutes to discuss your sudden departure. If I were you, I'd get out of here before they throw you out. Nick turned to her, his expression desperate. Rachel, please. She held up a hand. Don't. You. Dare. His mouth snapped shut. I turned, opened the door, and motioned for Rachel to go first. She smirked and strolled past me, her heels clicking against the tile. Before I walked out, I glanced back at Nick one last time. He was sitting there, stunned, staring at the file in front of him like he had just realized his entire life had gone up in flames. Enjoy unemployment, I said. Then I walked out, leaving him in ruins. Rachel and I sat in my car outside the office, watching as Nick stormed out of the building, his phone pressed to his ear. Probably calling our mom. She wouldn't be able to save him. Rachel took a deep breath, letting out a slow, satisfied exhale. That felt good. I chuckled. Yeah. It did. She turned to me, her eyes searching mine. So, what now? I thought about it. Erin was gone. Nick was destroyed. But there was still more to do. I had spent years living in their shadow, trusting people who didn't deserve it. Now it was my turn to start over. And I wasn't looking back. Nick's career was over. Erin was out of my house. The two people who had betrayed me most had been served exactly what they deserved. But as I sat in my car outside Fairmont Financial Group, watching my brother pace the sidewalk like a caged animal, I didn't feel the satisfaction I expected. The rage inside me wasn't gone. If anything, it felt sharper. Because I knew this wasn't over. Not yet. I made it back to Ben's apartment by mid-afternoon. He was already on his second beer, lounging on the couch, watching some mindless reality TV. He glanced at me as I walked in, then did a double take. Damn. You look like you just went to war. I dropped onto the armchair across from him. I kind of did. Ben smirked. Did you win? I exhaled. Nick's fired. Erin's out of the house. Ben let out a low whistle. Remind me never to piss you off. I was about to respond when my phone buzzed. I pulled it out, my stomach twisting when I saw the name on the screen. Mom. I let it ring. A minute later, a text came through. Jake. Call me. I sighed, rubbing a hand over my face. Of course Mom's involved now. Ben snorted. You knew she would be. Yeah. I did. A second later, another text popped up. Your brother is in trouble. He needs you. I stared at the words on my screen, feeling an ugly laugh rise in my throat. He needs me? After everything he did? I shook my head, typing out a single reply. He should have thought about that before sleeping with my wife. Then I put my phone on silent and tossed it onto the coffee table. If Nick wanted sympathy, he wasn't getting it from me. The next morning, I met Rachel for breakfast at a small diner near her apartment. She looked lighter somehow, like a weight had been lifted from her shoulders. She took a sip of her coffee, then smirked. You know, I got a very interesting phone call last night. I raised an eyebrow. From? Nick. I blinked. You answered? She shrugged. I was curious. And? Rachel leaned back in her chair, her fingers tapping against her mug. He begged me to take him back. Said he needed me. That he couldn't do this alone. I scoffed. Wow. And here I thought he was a big, tough guy. Oh, he's pathetic right now, she said, shaking her head. But the best part? He actually tried to blame me for his downfall. Like I forced him to cheat. Like I made him steal from his company. Unbelievable. Rachel smirked. I told him to go to hell. Then I blocked his number. I grinned. Good call. For a moment, we just sat there, the quiet hum of the diner around us. It was strange, this alliance we had built out of betrayal and revenge. But it worked. Rachel stirred her coffee absent-mindedly. So, what's next for you? I let out a slow breath. I don't know. And that was the truth. For so long, my life had revolved around Aaron. Around our marriage. Now, all of that was gone, ripped away in a matter of days. I had my house, my job, my friends. But I didn't feel like the same person anymore. Rachel studied me for a moment. Then she said, You should take a break. Get away for a while. I frowned. Where would I even go? She smirked. Anywhere but here. That night I stopped by the house. Not because I missed it. Not because I wanted to see Erin. But because I needed to make sure she was actually gone. I pulled into the driveway and killed the engine. The house was dark, silent. A stark contrast to the chaos that had filled it just a couple days ago. I stepped inside, flipping on the lights. The place felt empty. Erin's shoes weren't by the door. Her perfume didn't linger in the air. The framed photos of us, once lining the shelves, were gone. She had actually left. Good. I walked into the kitchen, grabbing a beer from the fridge. As I leaned against the counter, my mind drifted back to all the nights I had spent in this house, trusting her. Loving her. What a waste. I took a long sip, letting the bitterness settle on my tongue. Then, just as I was about to head upstairs, my phone buzzed. I frowned and pulled it out. A text. Unknown number. You really thought it was over? I froze. A cold chill ran down my spine as I stared at the words. Who the hell was this? Before I could respond, another message came through. Unknown number. You have no idea what's coming, Jake. I clenched my jaw, my fingers tightening around the phone. For a moment, I considered ignoring it. Then I typed back. Who is this? 3 little dots appeared. Then, unknown number, you'll find out soon enough. I exhaled slowly, my heart pounding. I had won the battle. But maybe the war wasn't over yet. I stared at the screen, my grip tightening around the phone. Unknown number, you really thought it was over? Unknown number, you have no idea what's coming, Jake. My pulse pounded in my ears. The messages felt like a challenge, a taunt. But from who? Nick? Erin? Someone else entirely? I took a deep breath, forcing my mind to stay calm. If they wanted to rattle me, they weren't going to get the satisfaction. I typed out a response. If you have something to say, say it. Otherwise, don't waste my time. The typing bubble appeared for a few seconds, then disappeared. Nothing. Coward. I exhaled sharply and locked my phone. I wasn't going to let some anonymous threats shake me. I had already burned my bridges with Erin and Nick. Whatever this was, I would handle it the same way. But something about the messages gnawed at me. I had won. I had destroyed them both. So why did it feel like the game was still being played? The next morning, I was in the middle of packing up the last of Erin's things, clothes she had left behind, some old notebooks, whatever junk I had shoved into a box, when there was a knock at the door. I frowned. It was too early for deliveries, and I hadn't invited anyone over. I walked over and pulled the door open, and immediately felt a rush of irritation. Mom! She stood there, arms crossed, lips pressed into a tight line. We need to talk, she said. I sighed, stepping aside. Let me guess, Nick ran crying to you. She walked in, shaking her head. Jake, this has gone too far. I let out a bitter laugh. Too far? He slept with my wife. She betrayed me. And you're worried about me? Mom exhaled sharply, rubbing her temples. Look, I'm not excusing what he did. But he's your brother. And you. She gestured wildly. You destroyed him, Jake. Good, I said flatly. She narrowed her eyes. You don't even feel guilty, do you? Not in the slightest. Mom groaned. Jake, listen to me. He's lost his job. Rachel dumped him. He has nothing now. I shrugged. Sounds like karma. She pursed her lips, looking at me like she didn't recognize the man in front of her. Maybe she didn't. You used to be better than this, she muttered. I felt a flare of anger rise in my chest. You know, Mom, maybe you should have raised Nick to be better. Maybe you should have told him to think about family before screwing his brother's wife. She flinched. For a moment, she looked genuinely ashamed. Good. Mom shook her head, defeated. He's staying with me, she finally admitted. He's not handling things well. I scoffed. Not my problem. She looked up at me, pleading. Jake, he's your family. I stared at her for a long moment. Then I said, Not anymore. She opened her mouth to argue, but I turned and walked to the door, holding it open. We're done here. Her shoulders slumped. She looked at me like she wanted to say more, but she finally sighed and walked out. I shut the door behind her and locked it. And just like that, I had cut the last thread connecting me to my old life. That night, I was sitting on the couch, flipping through TV channels mindlessly, when my phone buzzed again. Unknown number, tick-tock, Jake. I sat up, my grip tightening around the phone. Then, another text came through. A picture. I tapped it open, and my stomach dropped. It was my house. My house. Taken from outside. Whoever sent it was watching me. I jumped to my feet and strode to the window, peering outside. The street was empty. No strange cars, no shadows lurking in the driveway. But someone had been here. And they wanted me to know it. I swallowed hard and typed back. Who the hell are you? No response. A cold chill ran down my spine. I locked my doors, double-checked the security cameras, and sat in the darkness, heart pounding. This wasn't over. Not by a long shot. The next morning, I called Rachel. Hey, she answered, sounding half asleep. Rachel, I need to see you. She immediately picked up on the seriousness in my voice. What's wrong? Someone's watching me, I admitted. I don't know who. She cursed under her breath. Where are you now? At the house. Get out of there, she said immediately. Come to my place. We'll figure this out. I hesitated for a moment, but then I nodded to myself. On my way. I grabbed my keys, took one last glance around my house, and stepped outside. I had thought I was done fighting. But it looked like the war had just begun. I drove to Rachel's place with my jaw clenched, my grip on the wheel so tight my knuckles turned white. Someone was watching me. Someone wanted me to know they were watching me. I didn't scare easily, but I wasn't stupid either. This wasn't some random prank. This was personal. And I was going to find out who the hell was behind it. Rachel lived in a modern high-rise on the other side of town. The kind of place with security cameras, a doorman, and an elevator that required a key fob. Safe. I parked in the underground garage, taking a deep breath before stepping out. My head was on a swivel as I walked to the elevator, but no one seemed out of place. Still, my skin crawled with unease. Rachel was waiting at her door when I arrived, her arms crossed, concern etched into her face. You look like hell, she said. Thanks, I muttered, stepping inside. She shut the door behind me, locking it before turning back. Tell me everything. I ran a hand through my hair, sighing. I got a text last night. A picture of my house. Someone was outside, watching me. Rachel's face darkened. Nick? I shook my head. I don't think so. If it was him, he'd be throwing a tantrum, not playing mind games. She nodded slowly. Aaron? Possible, I admitted. But I don't know why she'd waste her time with this crap. Rachel bit her lip, pacing slightly. Did you check the security cameras? Yeah. Nothing. Whoever took the picture knew how to avoid them. That was what worried me the most. This wasn't just some amateur creeping around my property. Whoever this was, they knew what they were doing. Rachel sighed, rubbing her temples. This is bad, Jake. I let out a bitter laugh. No kidding. She sat down on the couch, tapping her fingers against her knee. Okay. So what's the plan? I leaned against the wall, arms crossed. I'm going to set a trap. Her eyes snapped to mine. A trap? I nodded. If they want to play games, fine. Let's see how they handle it when the tables are turned. She studied me for a moment, then smirked. I like the way you think. That afternoon, I went back to my house. I wasn't alone. Rachel came with me, sitting in the passenger seat as I pulled into the driveway. Are you sure about this? She asked as I killed the engine. No, I admitted. But I'm not going to sit around waiting for whoever this is to make the next move. We stepped inside, locking the door behind us. The house was eerily quiet, every creak of the floorboards making my nerves twitch. I walked over to the kitchen counter and pulled out my laptop, logging into the security system. I'm setting up a motion alert, I said. If anyone comes near the house tonight, I'll get notified immediately. Rachel hovered behind me, arms crossed. And then what? I looked up at her. Then I catch them. She nodded slowly. And if they're dangerous? I opened the drawer next to me, pulling out the small black object inside. A gun. Rachel's eyes widened slightly. Jesus, Jake. I met her gaze. I'm not taking chances. She hesitated, then nodded. All right. Just be careful, okay? I offered a small smile. Always. Rachel stayed with me that night. She claimed it was to help keep watch. But I knew she didn't want me to be alone. I appreciated it. Even if I didn't say it. We sat in the living room, lights dimmed, the security feed pulled up on my laptop. Hours passed. Nothing. By 2 a.m., Rachel was dozing off on the couch, her head resting against the armrest. I was running on coffee and adrenaline, my eyes glued to the screen. And then, a motion alert. My heart slammed against my ribs as I clicked the notification. The security camera feed loaded. A dark figure stood at the edge of my property. I leaned forward, squinting at the screen. The person was wearing a hood, their face obscured. They weren't moving, just standing there. Watching. My grip on the laptop tightened. They knew I was waiting. They were taunting me. Rachel stirred beside me. What is it? I turned the screen toward her. She blinked, rubbing her eyes. Then she stiffened. Shit, she whispered. I stood up, moving toward the front door. Rachel grabbed my wrist. Jake, wait. I gently pulled away. Stay inside. I stepped outside into the cold night air, my hand hovering near my waistband where my gun rested. The figure was still there, standing near the tree line. I took a slow step forward. You want something? No answer. I took another step. You've been watching me. Now I'm watching you. The figure tilted their head slightly. Then, slowly, they raised their arm and pointed directly at me. My blood ran cold. Then, they turned and disappeared into the darkness. I took off after them. Jake, no! Rachel's voice rang out behind me, but I ignored it. I sprinted across the lawn, my pulse pounding in my ears. The figure darted between the trees, quick and agile. I was faster. I closed the gap, reaching out, and grabbed the back of their hoodie, yanking them backward. They hit the ground hard, letting out a sharp gasp of pain. I pinned them down, my breath ragged. Who the hell are you? I growled. The person let out a weak chuckle. A familiar chuckle. I reached forward and yanked the hood back. My heart stopped. Erin. Her lip was split, her eyes wild, her breathing heavy. But she was smiling. A slow, eerie smile that sent a chill through my entire body. I stared at her, trying to make sense of what I was seeing. What the hell are you doing? I demanded. She just laughed softly, shaking her head. Then she whispered, You should have killed me when you had the chance. And that was when I heard the click of a gun. Not mine. Someone else's. Behind me. Rachel screamed. I barely had time to react before everything went black. A deafening crack shattered the night. The last thing I saw before the world tipped sideways was Erin's wild, manic smile. Then pain. White-hot and searing. My body hit the ground hard, my vision blurring, my breath coming in short, uneven gasps. The scent of damp earth filled my nostrils, mixing with something sharp and metallic. Blood. My blood. Someone had shot me. I could hear Rachel screaming in the distance, her voice frantic and terrified. Jake! Jake! My head swam as I struggled to push myself up. My limbs felt heavy, sluggish. My ears were ringing, drowning out the chaos around me. Through the haze of pain, I saw Erin crawling backward in the dirt, her eyes wide. But it wasn't me she was looking at. It was the shadow standing behind me. I forced my head to turn, my heart hammering in my chest. And then I saw him. Nick. Standing there, gripping a gun with shaking hands. His face was pale, his eyes wild with shock. Nick! I rasped, my voice barely more than a whisper. He took a shaky step forward, his breath ragged. I didn't mean to. His voice broke. I tried to move, but pain shot through my shoulder like fire. I gritted my teeth. You shot me. Nick's eyes darted between me, Erin, and Rachel, his grip on the gun tightening. You were attacking her, he blurted. I didn't know what else to do. I let out a harsh, bitter laugh. You're still trying to save her? After everything? Nick's jaw clenched, his face twisting with emotions I couldn't decipher. Behind him, Rachel was standing frozen, her eyes locked on the gun in his hands. Nick, she said, her voice steady despite the fear in her eyes. Put the gun down. His head snapped toward her. Stay out of this, Rachel. She took a slow step forward. You don't want to do this. I didn't want any of this. Nick shouted, his voice raw. I didn't want to lose my job. I didn't want to lose you. I didn't want Jake to ruin my life. I clenched my jaw against the pain, forcing myself into a sitting position. You ruined your own life, Nick. His eyes flickered with something dangerous. You always had everything, he hissed. The perfect job. The perfect house. The perfect life. And Erin. His voice broke, and his gaze shifted toward her. She was supposed to love me. Erin, still on the ground, let out a breathless, hollow laugh. Oh, Nick. You really are a fool. Nick's face twisted in confusion. What? Erin's lips curled into a smirk, despite the blood on her face. You were never anything more than a distraction. Nick blinked. No. She tilted her head, her expression taunting. Did you really think I wanted to be with you? That I would trade Jake for this? She gestured at him, her voice dripping with disgust. You were pathetic enough to fall for it, but let's be real, Nick. You were just convenient. Something in Nick snapped. His hands trembled, the gun wavering as he pointed it at her. Shut up. Erin just smiled. Go ahead, Nick. Do it. Prove to Jake that you're really the worthless little brother he's always known you were. Nick's face twisted, his whole body shaking. Rachel tensed beside him. Nick, don't. And for a moment, I thought he might actually pull the trigger. But then, he let out a choked sob and dropped the gun. It hit the ground with a dull thud. He took a step back, his entire body crumbling in on itself. I can't. Rachel rushed forward, kicking the gun away before Erin could grab it. Then she grabbed Nick's shoulders, shaking him. "Look at me!" Nick's eyes were unfocused, his whole body trembling. "Go home," Rachel ordered. "Go to your mother's house. Get the hell away from here before I call the police." He swallowed hard, his face pale with horror. I didn't mean to." "Go!" Rachel snapped. Nick turned and ran. I watched him disappear into the night, my vision swimming. Then I turned my head, looking at Erin. She was still sitting in the dirt, her eyes locked on the gun that Rachel had kicked away. For the first time since this all began, she looked afraid. She knew. It was over. I forced myself to my feet, swaying slightly. Rachel was at my side instantly, steadying me. "Jake, we need to get you to a hospital." I ignored her. My eyes stayed locked on Erin as I took a slow step toward her. "You lost," I murmured. She didn't respond. I crouched down, ignoring the pain in my shoulder, and spoke softly. "And you know what the best part is?" She finally met my eyes. "I never even had to touch you to destroy you." A flicker of something passed through her eyes. Fear. Regret. Rage. Maybe all of it. I stood back up, stepping away. "Stay the hell away from me." Rachel grabbed my arm. "Come on. Let's go." I let her lead me toward the car. My legs felt like lead, my vision still hazy. I barely noticed the blood seeping into my shirt. I barely noticed the world spinning around me. All I could think about was this. It was finally over. And yet, deep down, I knew I'd never be the same again. Rachel's car tore through the empty streets, the glow of streetlights flickering past in a blur. My shoulder throbbed, the pain radiating through my entire body. Blood soaked my shirt, sticking the fabric to my skin, but I barely felt it. All I could think about was Nick. The look in his eyes when he pulled the trigger. The way his hands shook when he realized what he had done. And Erin. Even after all of this, even after she had lost everything, she still tried to manipulate him. Tried to manipulate me. I should have hated her. I should have felt victorious. But all I felt was empty. Rachel's knuckles were white against the steering wheel. She kept glancing at me, her lips pressed into a thin line. "You're losing too much blood," she said tightly. "We need to get you to a hospital." I exhaled sharply, leaning my head against the seat. "No hospital." She shot me a glare. "Jake." "I can't, Rachel." My voice came out strained, weak. "If I show up with a gunshot wound, the cops will be all over it. I don't need that right now." She let out a frustrated noise but didn't argue. "Fine. But you need stitches. You need. Just get me to your place," I muttered. "I'll deal with it." She let out a deep breath and nodded. I closed my eyes, letting the exhaustion pull me under. By the time we reached Rachel's place, my head was swimming. I was lightheaded, my limbs heavy, my body barely responding. Rachel threw the car into park and rushed to my side, practically dragging me inside. "Sit down," she ordered, pushing me onto her couch. "Don't move." I didn't have the energy to argue. She disappeared into the bathroom, returning with a first aid kit, towels, and a bottle of whiskey. "This is going to hurt," she warned. I smirked weakly. "Like it doesn't already?" She rolled her eyes. "Yeah, well, it's about to get worse." She poured the whiskey onto a cloth and pressed it against my wound. The pain was instant, sharp, searing, like someone had shoved a hot iron against my skin. I let out a harsh hiss, my fingers digging into the couch. Rachel winced. "Sorry." I gritted my teeth, breathing through the pain. "Just do it." She worked quickly, her hands steady as she cleaned and bandaged the wound. I watched her, my mind hazy. "You've done this before," I murmured. Rachel's lips pressed into a thin line. "My dad was a drunk. Got into a lot of fights. My mom wasn't around much, so yeah. I learned how to patch people up." I didn't know what to say to that. So I just said, "Thank you." She looked up at me, her expression softening. You don't have to thank me, Jake. I swallowed hard. Yeah. I do. A beat of silence stretched between us. Then she sat back with a sigh, rubbing a hand over her face. What now? I exhaled slowly. Now I figure out what to do with the rest of my life. Rachel smirked. Sounds exhausting. I let out a weak chuckle. You have no idea. The next morning, I woke up to the sound of my phone vibrating. I groaned, reaching for it, my body protesting every movement. Mom. I sighed, debating whether to answer. Then I pressed accept and brought the phone to my ear. Jake. Her voice was quiet, hesitant. I sat up slowly, running a hand down my face. Mom. There was a long pause. Then, Nick came home last night, she said softly. I clenched my jaw. Good for him. Jake. She hesitated. He told me what happened. I didn't say anything. Mom took a shaky breath. He's a mess. He's not eating. Not sleeping. He just sits there. He keeps saying he didn't mean to. I let out a humorless laugh. Didn't mean to shoot me? She flinched. Jake, please. He's still your brother. I closed my eyes. No. He's not. Mom sniffled. I don't know what to do. I sighed, rubbing my temple. You can't fix him, Mom. I have to try. I swallowed the lump in my throat. Then good luck. I hung up. Rachel was standing in the doorway, watching me carefully. That was your mom? I nodded. She hesitated. And? I exhaled. And nothing. Rachel walked over, sitting beside me. You okay? I let out a bitter laugh. No. She was quiet for a moment. Then she said, You should leave town for a while. I looked at her, raising an eyebrow. You trying to get rid of me? She smirked. No. But you need a fresh start. This place? This house? Nick, Erin, your mom? They're all ghosts, Jake. And you're just living in the ruins. I swallowed hard, letting her words sink in. A fresh start. A new life. Could I do that? I ran a hand through my hair. Maybe you're right. Rachel grinned. Of course I'm right. For the first time in a long time, I smiled. Maybe I was finally ready to move on. A week passed. A week of silence. No more cryptic messages. No more late-night phone calls. No sign of Nick. No word from Erin. The storm had passed. And yet I still felt like a man standing in the wreckage, staring at the pieces of the life I had built, wondering if there was anything left to salvage. There wasn't. So I was leaving. I stood in my bedroom, the same room where I had walked in on Erin and Nick, the same room where my world had collapsed. Everything was packed. The closet was empty, the drawers bare. My bag sat by the door waiting. I should have done this sooner. I pulled out my phone and dialed a number I hadn't called in years. After 3 rings, a familiar voice answered. Hey man, Ben said. You sure about this? I glanced around the empty room. Yeah. Ben let out a breath. Damn. Where are you heading? I smirked. Somewhere warm. Maybe a beach. Just anywhere but here. Ben chuckled. Sounds like a plan. You need anything before you go? Nah. Just needed to tell someone. Well, Ben said, his voice lighter. When you're settled, send me a picture of your ugly face so I know you're alive. Will do. I hung up, slipping the phone into my pocket. That was it then. Time to go. I was locking up the house when I heard a car pull up behind me. I turned, my stomach tightening as I saw her. Erin. She stepped out of the car slowly, hesitating as she took me in. I could see the hesitation in her eyes, the words she was struggling to find. I sighed. What do you want, Erin? She took a small step forward. You're leaving? I gestured to the packed car. What does it look like? She swallowed. Jake, I don't. I cut in. Whatever you're about to say, don't. Her face crumbled. I was going to say I'm sorry. I stared at her, my jaw tightening. You don't get to be sorry, Erin. You made your choices. You destroyed everything. And now? Now you have to live with that. Her eyes glistened. I never wanted to hurt you. I let out a bitter laugh. And yet you did. She looked down, gripping her arms. Do you think you'll ever forgive me? I exhaled slowly, considering my words carefully. No. Her breath hitched. Jake. Goodbye, Erin. I turned, got into my car, and started the engine. And this time, I didn't look back. The city faded in my rearview mirror, the roads stretching endlessly in front of me. A new beginning. A fresh start. For the first time in weeks, I felt free. And as I drove into the horizon, I finally allowed myself to smile.